everyone. So today we are continuing on Mishnah 8. We're talking about how a judge is treating the litigants. And the first part was telling us that the judge should not act like a lawyer to advocate on behalf of the litigants. His job is to hear what they have to say. The second part of the Mishnah says as follows. So, when the litigants are standing in front of you, you should look at that, both of them, as if they're wicked. In other words, they're whatever they're saying, don't trust. However, once they leave, now they're not in front of you anymore. You should view them as if they were good, they were innocent. Kiblu alehem es hadin, when they accept upon themselves the judgment. So, first part, you have two guys standing in front of you. Obviously, this is the case. So don't look and say, oh, this guy's probably right, the other guy's probably wrong. Now, it seems to be intuitive that obviously a judge should not be viewing one person as more right than the other. However, let's say the two people who are coming in front of you are known, one of them is known to be a righteous individual and one of them is known to be a crook. And here they come in front of you for the case. There is certainly a tendency that you might have to say, oh, whatever comes out of this guy's mouth is going to be dishonest. What comes out of the other person's mouth is about to be the truth because they're such a good person. So the Mishnah is teaching us that Rabbi Yehuda ben Tabai is teaching us that no, when you are listening to them, you cannot view it as one person is a righteous person. I don't care what he's done up until this point in time. At this moment, anything that he says is suspect. And obviously, if a person judged everyone who was seeming, a righteous person always to be correct, you would never be able to judge anything against that person. There would be no point in having any court cases. They'll just automatically give him the win, right? And doesn't always work that way. When we say to view him as a wicked person, that's a little bit of a way of saying it in an extreme way, but essentially the only way you're going to clarify the truth is to be able to suspect that the person is lying. Otherwise, if you're not skeptical of what they're saying, then you're really not going to explore it either. There's another view that says that just the fact that you are in that lawsuit is already not looking so good for you. Even that person who you say is a righteous person, what are they doing in a lawsuit? Now, you say, well, not their fault they're in a lawsuit. We also know that ideally we're supposed to compromise. So ideally, before you ever get to the point of having a case, there should have been some. Ideally, would have been a compromise that was found. And certainly even judges certainly try to do that before the case is tried. But if we got that far that there is no compromise, so then there's a little bit of a taint to both of them. Rabbi Twersky points out that really, so that's another commentary as well, that sometimes you can believe something is true. You mean it. You don't even realize it's not true. You think what you're saying is the truth. So you could have a person who's a righteous person who believes what they're saying. They're not lying. Happens to be that what they're saying is not true, but they're not lying because they think that they're telling the truth. And that's the judge's responsibility, to be able to get to the real truth of the matter, to be able to say, no, you're mistaken. You thought that that's what it was, but it's not really true. And that's why the judge has to be skeptical and be able to really examine everything they say. Cases happen where somebody you were going to lend the person money and you got sidetracked, you forgot to do it, or you were going to pay him back, and you had everything lined up, you were ready to do it, and then somehow you forgot. And in the meantime, someone else, one of your kids or someone else from your family borrowed that money to go and spend it on something else. Oh, it's not there. I assume I paid the person, right? It happens. So the judge's responsibility is to be skeptical about what everyone says, even if they're a righteous person. The next part said, though, once the ruling is done, so that was while they're in court. But once the ruling is over, now you have to view them as if they are innocent, as if they're both righteous. Now, you had a case, you ruled in the case. one was right and one was wrong. The one who was wrong, he was obviously wrong. So it looks like he's not so innocent. So you have to assume that either he had made a mistake and it wasn't he didn't realize that he was doing something wrong, or okay, you know what? He did something wrong, and now he's repented. He's feel bad about it. He says, "Oh, you know what? I'm not going to do that kind of behavior again. I realize I was wrong." You have to assume that that's the case. Now, that, of course, is where the person accepted the ruling. We're not talking about the guy who is going down fighting and is being forced to follow the judgment. We're talking about the person who accepted the judgment. The person who accepted the judgment shows, if I accept the judgment, then I realize I was wrong and I'm willing to pay for it. So then you have to assume that this person is not likely to do it again, and in the future they will be honest. Um, we say also, even this goes so far as, in many cases in court, you have to swear. And again, it's different than a Canadian court or other civil courts where before you testify, right, you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. That's not what we're talking about. In a Jewish court, we don't have that kind of an oath, but there are situations where a person is obligated to take a specific oath that says, I don't have that money or something like that, or I don't have what belongs to that other person. And so let's say that's the case, and you swore that I paid, and you really believe you paid. So again, after the fact, after it's been proven that it's not true, the judge should still view that person as saying, you know what, I know you swore falsely, but you swore falsely because you didn't realize it. It wasn't that you purposely knew you were swearing falsely and still did it anyway, because that would have been that obviously that's a terrible offense. Um, And generally, we say when it comes to money, people are blind, right? That it distorts your view, and so therefore, in this case, where you accepted the ruling, we say you're right, you're righteous. And if another case comes up, or so, even let's say it's not a court case, because the court case would be fresh again, but let's say it was a situation that you're dealing with, you don't have to assume definitively that this guy is a liar in future dealings. Um, and that means that guys, we talked about judging people favorably in general, not in terms of a court case, but in general. So if you have this person who is in court who was ruled against him, and now he's accepted the ruling, and then some other scenario happens, and you see something happening, and you say, that doesn't look so good. Was that person doing something wrong? You have to figure out how to judge him favorably, because you can't assume that he's a bad person. He may have done so. This circumstance could be something you didn't realize was going on. It's the same judging favorably that we talked about before. Um, and finally, another way to read this mitzvah is to say, while they're standing before you, you can view them as wicked, and once they leave, you view them as righteous, and that's the responsibility of a judge. We have a couple of minutes. Let's give you one quick story about a situation where people how people think and how money can blind someone. It was a famous case where I think it was a butcher. He came to the rabbi with, I think it was Rabbi Akiva Eger. He came to him with a question about a cow that was whether it was kosher or not kosher, and cows were obviously worth a lot of money. And Rabbi Akiva Eger ruled that the animal was not kosher, and the person accepted the judgment. And later, a couple of weeks later, there was a case where he came and he had an argument with someone else, a dispute over money. And again, it was a small amount of money. It wasn't a lot of money. It was a small amount of money, and Rabbi Akiva Eger ruled against him. And this time, the guy flew off the handle and went into a rage, and he was cursing him. It was really beyond. And um, in the so like, why is it that before, when I ruled against you, for hundreds and hundreds of dollars, you accepted it, and now you are not able to accept it? So it was a small amount of money. So the response was because the other guy won. So when someone else is in, when a lot of times you can accept your own loss, but you can't accept the loss when it's someone else is gaining by it, and that blinds you. So it's one thing that I'm willing to give up my own money, but it's another thing when someone else is going to be winning, then I don't see that he's right. I must be right, and that the person could actually believe it, even though they're totally incorrect. And therefore, if the person does accept the ruling, we would view that as, oh, that person has changed it. In this case, obviously, the guy didn't accept the ruling, and that was a problem. Okay, we will hold it there. Have a great day, everyone. Tomorrow we move on.